Hello and welcome to the Pharmacy Informatics Professor 2020 with your host, Dr. Armin Simonian. At the core of every electronic health record system and every pharmacy system and every application or technology that's applied to the medication use process, at the core of all of these is the drug database. Now, it might be called a medication master, might be called a drug library, a drug file, or drug database, but it's all the same thing. We have to build a database of all of the medications that are going to be in use at our site, make sure that we build it properly and consistently, make sure that the use of it will lead to safe and effective medication therapies, and we also have to maintain these over time. So today I want to focus a little bit more on the drug database itself, which is the core of our systems. Let's do a little bit of review on things that we've talked about before up to this point in previous episodes, and then we will get started with getting a little bit more deeper into drug databases. So you've seen this before, it's a prescription, but it shows that our pharmacy systems are really made up of a group of databases in a different view. You see a drug file, patient file, prescription file, etc. These all have keys and can be brought in, and we've talked about this before when we talked about data structures and databases. So standardization to me is one of the most important things you can do as a pharmacist when you're working specifically on the building and the maintenance of the drug database. Standardization today, I want to talk about mnemonics, nomenclature, code sets, and interfaces, and just really emphasize the importance of taking a very standard approach when building and maintaining these systems. So when we talk about mnemonics, these are really shortcuts. They're built into the system. When we used to enter orders into our pharmacy system separately, these were more important because you could look up a drug using a quick code. Not as important these days, but usually in any system, any drug database, you have to have a key, some kind of a key. Now, the key can be a mnemonic, or it can be an NDC number or some other identifier of the unique product, but there has to be some kind of a key within the database. And this is just one way of developing a key. And these rules are for making standard mnemonics. And here's an example of a drug diphenhydramine, and you know that it comes in a lot of different dose forms, and here we have the tablets, injection, and liquids, and you can see how, following the previous rules on the previous screen, you can build these mnemonics into your system. The whole point, though, is have a standard method that's consistent in building these mnemonics. When we look at the drug file, obviously, we're not just entering the key, but also a lot of information about each drug product. And so we've seen this before, how the drug database is built. And this is just a very small portion of what might be included in a drug database, especially in an electronic health record system where we have computerized provider order entry, or in an outpatient system where we're doing e-prescribing. Nomenclature is very important. So how we name the drugs in the system is extremely important, especially when we have the eyes of the provider and they're prescribing medications. We want to make sure that the lists are displayed properly and that they're finding all the choices that they intended to for that particular medication. So just writing out the first word of the generic name consistently, using tall man lettering when possible, and then omitting certain fields that are not significant. If we can simplify how things are displayed on the screen, it's easier for the prescriber's eye to follow and pick the right product. Here's an example. When we look at potassium products, we have potassium acetate, chloride, and phosphate, and how you build these into the system will really make a big difference on how a search result comes about. So if you're building your systems using the chemical names, then a person typing in potassium might not find KCl, and vice versa. So you have to be very cognizant of this and maybe build the same item with multiple names, a brand, generic, or a substitute name. So we might have a primary and a synonym. So for each primary product, we might have a description of that product and then a synonym, so that if the provider searches for potassium or KCl, they still get all the results, all the same consistent results. And we know there's other potassium products, as mentioned before, so you want all of these to be displayed properly, sorted properly, and lined up properly, so that the provider, whoever's writing the prescription, ordering the medication, can find the right choice every time. We can go a step further and build what we call order sentences, and this is where we make it easier for the provider to prescribe the right medication in the right dose, by the right route, and with the right frequency, by linking all of those together, kind of the most common dosing parameters for a medication. And then they can always modify those, but at least you give them something to start with that is appropriate for that medication. And here's an example of how we're starting to build order sentences, and we have different morphine products, and within the IV immediate release, you can have specially built order sentences that might follow the way that you prescribe medications at your institution. The next step after this is to link order sentences together into order sets, so that if a prescriber is looking at a patient who has pain and wants to do pain management, they can start with a dose of acetaminophen for mild pain, then move on to a hydrocodone acetaminophen combination, and then eventually to morphine for the more severe pain. We can link all these together in an order set. The prescriber can go ahead and click the choices that they want, and this can be based on evidence-based medicine or best practices, and with one click of the order button can make sure that they have appropriate therapy for pain management for this patient. We've talked about communication standards for interfacing, such as HL7, medication terminology that might include an NDC number, and then medical terminology, which we might include SNOMED and ICD-10. And there are others. There's CPT codes, and these are usually used for billing with insurance companies. There's the ICD, which we've talked about, and then there's also the logical observation identifiers, names and codes, LOINC, and this is another code set or controlled vocabulary. With pharmacy, we really are most interested in SNOMED because that is usually linked to documentation of allergies, so allergens, drug allergens. And then, of course, both in inpatient and outpatient, we're very focused in on the NDC number of the product. And there's the new naming system and terminology, medication terminology, that supports interoperability called RxNorm, which is kind of the next step after HL7. So as a pharmacy informaticist, you might be more focused in on these controlled vocabularies. And again, interface standards we've talked about before. And the point is that for all of these systems to work together, you really have to build a very consistent drug database using mnemonic nomenclature standards, using standard vocabularies, so that within the system and between systems, you can transfer orders. For example, if you are interfacing your electronic health record to an automated dispensing cabinet, you want to transfer those medication orders. You have to write very specific logic for that, and also helping with the situation is a very consistent database that has the same field sizes consistently throughout, so that the interface can operate without any hiccups or any problems with rejected transactions. This is just an example of an HL7 message to give you a little idea of what's happening behind the scenes. And there are some parallel bars there. Each one of these bars sets off a different field in the drug database, or in this case, an admissions database for a patient. And so the computer is very exact, black and white, ones and zeros, and needs to have everything in the right place in a standard format. So building a clean drug database really helps with interfacing. This is the NCPDP standard for e-prescribing. So you see that, again, we have to be consistent because there are different segments of the message that contain the drug and other information about the prescription. I had an interesting experience with converting after implementing pharmacy systems at a number of different institutions. I was in charge of a project to convert a pharmacy system and integrate it into our new electronic health system that was being implemented at our hospitals. And what happened along the way was that we didn't do proper testing. We didn't test every single item before going live, and we had a very difficult go live process. So we had to go back and do cleanup. So in this article, I talk about nomenclature standards and having a style guide and making sure that we're consistent in the building, but also emphasize that when you do build these drug databases or even modify them, update them with new drugs, you want to make sure and test every single item that you've touched to make sure that it functions properly within the software and you don't have any problems that might lead to an adverse drug event. So with that, I hope that this was helpful to give you a little bit of a deeper understanding of drug databases and what you might do as a pharmacy informaticist in terms of your work in building and maintaining these systems. If this was helpful to you, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. And I'll thank you for that. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, look after the health of others, and I'll start working on the next episode and hopefully see you next time. Take care.